the key is to allow, to trust and to know that there is a greater wisdom at play here. And I liken it very much to a process of birth. You know, we have been in this womb for so long that has been gestating us. And we can, you know, we are, Earth is in labor pains right now. The Divine Mother is in labor pains right now, giving birth to us into this higher state of consciousness. And to continue to, as much as possible, and this is obviously a journey and a practice and something that we live into day by day, but to continue to let go of our need to control, to enter into a state of surrender and allowing, because this is our destiny. As you know, Bola, this is our destiny, and we don't have to create it for ourselves. It's like the caterpillar that undergoes a metamorphosis. It doesn't have to make itself into a butterfly. It hangs itself upside down from a twig, and that is an archetypal pose of surrender. You know, in the tarot, it's the hanged man. It's the hanging upside down, you know, putting the head down. And that's the position of the easiest kind of birth. You know, not the breech birth where we're resisting the process, but actually surrendering continually in that state and really being in a place of allowing. And you know, it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come easy because we are so conditioned to try to control, to believe that everything is on us to make happen. We're so conditioned to strive to make things happen and to accomplish things. So this is very counterintuitive. Well, not counterintuitive, but countercultural, certainly. It's very yin. You know, it's very much the feminine principle. Not trying to control, but actually co-creating by allowing ourselves to be birthed and surrendering to the process that is so much bigger than any of us. And it's completely trustworthy and holds us in love, even when we may be terrified. We are never not held in love. That's the basic fundamental understanding. Even if we may not remember it or know it, love never abandons us.
I love that. I resonate with that. It's all about collective consciousness, an expansion of collective consciousness, and awakening. We all have a light. We all have something that is a way that we want to serve. There is something that we have come that is unique about us. And I think when we have these different guests, like I have on my podcast, it's really about helping others to awaken their own that unique self, that unique gift within us. So I am inspired by that, and I feel resonate with that. That's good. I can't even begin to say how many dark nights of the soul I have had. And it's because life is ups and downs. We will always have contrast. This is the nature of the earth plane, always has contrast. So we never get to a place where everything is so wonderful and hunky-dory. What we are able to do is we're able to hold the light and align to the light quicker and quicker. We're able to feel comfortable and allow the flow, knowing that the river understands us, knowing that we can surrender to the river. We're able to remember that again and again, but there will still be turpits. There will still be, waterfalls we're diving into. So it's always, this is the fun of planet Earth, I think. Welcome to the Daily Soul Bytes show. My name is Bolaabimbolaauthor, and I'm your host. And this is the show where we interview authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs in the fields of spirituality, psychology, and leadership for the expansion of collective consciousness. And today I have a very special guest all the way from Philadelphia. Her name is Patricia Pearce. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Bola, for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation and seeing where it takes us.
Yes, so am I. And I'll read a bit about your bio before we start. Patricia Pearce is a writer, a spiritual teacher, a speaker, a host of the WeAwakening podcast, and she serves on the board of directors of the Center for Contemporary Mysticism in Philadelphia. And although she was brought up in the traditional Christian denomination, and earlier in her vocational life as a pastor, her spiritual awakening in 2002 took her beyond the boundaries of the Christian belief system. And I'd love to hear a lot about that. But first, tell us, Patricia, a bit about your life before spiritual awakening. And then I want you to explain to us how spiritual awakening was for you and how you help your clients.
Yes, thank you for that beautiful question. Yes, a lot of things led me into the ministry, and I'm not going to tell the whole story because we would be here for a long time. But as you say, I was raised in a mainstream Protestant denomination. We were Presbyterians. But it really was after college, I went into the Peace Corps, which, for those in your audience who don't know of that, it's an agency of the United States government that sends volunteers to different places of the world to support development in various ways. And I went and worked in a program called Appropriate Technology. So helping develop really sustainable energy sources for people in Ecuador. This was in South America. So after college, I was in Ecuador for a couple of years, 2.5 years actually. And I had been, as an undergrad, I had studied international affairs. And I went into the Peace Corps with a very, I would say, political and economic orientation, believing that, our problems can be solved if we just have the right kind of politics and the right kind of economics. So I went there with that orientation. And when I got there, Bola, I was so struck by the enormous disparities of wealth that I witnessed in that country. And I was working in the Andes with, I was living in an indigenous community there. And I sensed that what was beneath, well, first of all, it felt to me like this problem is so big, politics can't even touch it. And I had the sense that beneath it all was some sort of a spiritual sickness. And I really, I wanted to understand what that was. And I had some experiences while I was there that opened that up for me. And it really planted in me the seeds of going into ministry, because I came to see that really beneath all of our injustices, there are basic spiritual, I would say, misalignments that are at the core of it. So I went into seminary, and a couple of years after I was back from my stint in Ecuador. And I went into the ministry then, and I served as a pastor in a couple of locations, and collectively 17 years. But to get to the point of the spiritual awakening experience, that came in 2002. And it followed the death of a very, very close friend of mine, someone that I knew in seminary. She and I had really formed a deep bond, and we had traveled some sort of difficult spiritual terrain together as we were coming to terms with the patriarchal foundations of the church, of institutional Christianity. And she, in 2001, underwent a bone marrow transplant, or actually 2000, for aplastic anemia. And she died from complications from that procedure. And her death had a very deep effect on me. And immediately after she died, I had this, grief can open us up in ways. Grief can be a portal for us and can initiate great transformation in our lives. And her death served that for me. And after she died, I felt this strong resolve in me not to live my life on the surface. I mean, you would think that if I, had gone to the Peace Corps and I'd served as a pastor and all of this, that I wasn't living my life on the surface. But I sensed that there was a dimension to my being, to my existence, that I had never known. And I wanted to know what that was. And so I just kind of put this intention out, and I felt such a clear alignment in myself around that intention. And it was a little, it was a year and a few months, maybe almost a year and 3 months after her death, when I started experiencing these, I would call it a tsunami of synchronicities, just, impossible so-called coincidences that my worldview could not accommodate. It just, my rational worldview had no place for these sorts of occurrences. And I felt like I was suddenly inside of a novel where, it was being authored by some unseen hand. And it was, I didn't know what was happening. My worldview was crumbling, and I didn't know what to do except to surrender to it. And so I went to the woods here in Philadelphia. We have a wonderful park area that's been set aside, and wonderful woods where I go. I would go often to meditate and such. So I went to the woods one afternoon. Actually, it was in July, and it was hot and it was humid. And I walked to this rock where I would sometimes go and sit. And I sat down, and I didn't know what to do except to give thanks, because I sensed that something was happening in me, and it was because of my web of relationships, that somehow that's what was at the heart of all of this. So as I sat there, I just began to give thanks, say thank you for this person, thank you for this person, and naming the names. And in the instant that I began to do that, I had this sudden realization that I'm not a separate self. All of a sudden, I could see that all of my life I had lived as though I were a separate self, and believed that that's what I was. But it was like I could suddenly see that that was an illusion, and that I'm more like, you know how on the surface of a pond, the ripples, if the breeze is blowing, the ripples will be playing across the surface of the water, and they interact and they form these patterns. And that's what it felt like, that I am just like this confluence of infinite influences that are all combining to manifest something known as, me. But it wasn't, there's nothing separate about it. Everything is interconnected. So as soon as I had that realization, I started having these waves of energy just cascade through my body. And it was a very powerful Kundalini kind of an experience. And the energy was so intense, and I was sobbing, and I felt like something was dying in me and something was being born all at the same time. And this went on for, I don't know, how many minutes, but I was just, this energy was just so intense. And finally it subsided, and I opened my eyes, and I saw a world that I had never seen before, where I could see, and it's like with more than the eyes of the body, right? It's with the eyes of the soul. I could see that everything is sentient. I could see the rock beneath my feet was sentient. The soil, everything was consciousness, was alive. And everything was interconnected, that everything is love, that time as we know it doesn't exist, linear time, that everything is present in an eternal now, that death doesn't exist. And I really felt myself in love, capital L love. I was in love. And at that same moment, I knew, first of all, that something profound was happening, not just in me, but across the planet. that there is a profound transformation that is underway. And I also knew that if enough of us give ourselves over to this inbreaking of love, that the earth can be healed. No question in my mind. And so for a few days, I was in this heightened state of consciousness and feeling like, downloads of information were coming, and the energy continued to be very intense, and my hands and my feet felt like they were just on fire sometimes with the intensity of the energy. And it just kept sort of crescendoing until it felt like then I was just struck by this lightning bolt of a realization that we are in a dream, that this world is a form of dream in which we are acting out, playing out the contents of our beliefs, our unconsciousness and unconscious. And it is like a dream state. We are not awake, we're sleeping. I mean, we're sleepwalking, we're sleep talking, but we're not awake, and we're playing out this dream. And as soon as I had that realization, it's like everything subsided into this calm, this peacefulness, and this calm is like this clear knowing. So that was like, the moment when all of this broke open for me. And then, of course, after that, there's the integration process, which is not easy. But that kind of gives you a taste of what that experience was like.
Well, I love the way you have experienced life going from politics into spirituality. That's not very rare, actually. Same for me. I went from politics straight into spirituality. There's something about what you learn, what you see in that sphere, disparities of contrasts of wealth and poverty exist all over the world. But when you put yourself in a position where you are facing it, hands-on, you are forced to question your own self. It is enough to bring about an awakening within us. And I know that for me, that spiritual awakening process, you start off really dreaming. You are in a dream. You think you're just that personality, a bunch of personalities. If you're lucky to recognize a bunch of personalities, because there is also a programming that stops us from recognizing the bunch of personalities that we have. And we are made to think it's a multiple personality disorder. And this is something that stops us from even integrating our personalities on a day-to-day, just the ego system in itself. When you move beyond that, through an awakening of some sort, the Kundalini awakening is something that is very common for all of us. And you come to a place where you actually begin to understand the ego self a little bit more. And there's an ego death that comes when you realize that that ego is not really you. It is so inconstant. It is so non-consistent that you know that there is a part of me that is unchanging compared to this side of me that changes all the time. And I love the way you described it as the ripples in the water. There is a part of you that is just moving all the time. And there's a part of you that is really in flow, in deep connection with source, with divine source. And then you come to that place where you're purging the dark nights of the soul. The ego death is a dark night of the soul on its own. The waking up from the dream is a dark night of the soul. It's almost like you either come into this plane believing in your ego death, in your ego self, or you come to explore beings in dark nights of the soul, beams of awakening. And really, it's a journey. And to come to that place where we realize that we are the unchanging self. We are a part of infinite intelligence. This is what my book is about, aligning to source. In my book, Daily Soul Bytes, I actually share a lot of perspectives that awaken and alignment, a familiarity with higher perspectives of source, of love, of forgiveness, of gratitude, of thankfulness. And these are the things that really keep us aligned to source, aligned to those higher perspectives that give us our best outcomes. So I love the spiritual awakening process, but it's the dark nights of the soul that I know many people steer away from. It's not easy, but it's worth it for those who choose, because it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It is a choice. I would love to know more, Patricia, around the synchronicities you mentioned, because this is so key. The self-awareness that we need to recognize the synchronicities and to understand the meanings behind them and to flow with them, to allow them. Because life, the synchronicity is abundance. This is one of the abundant gifts that we have. Synchronicities, which is how the universe, the source, really connects with us and helps us to achieve our intentions. So I'd love to know how the universe was speaking to you with those synchronicities and how you came to allow it to give way. Then I'd love to know a bit more about how you work with your cards. But a bit about those, just curiosity on my part around what those synchronicities.
It's so funny because it's been now 22 years, and it's almost like the synchronicities themselves, like what they were, have faded in my mind. It's like they accomplished their purpose, which was to undermine my worldview, to destabilize my quote reality, the thing that I had taken to be reality, that as it turns out isn't reality. It's the dream. But I do remember a lot of them had to do with power, with our power, like being directed to books, like people's comments, leading me to a book, and I open it up, and it's like, and there's an answer to a question that I've been holding for years. I had a very significant dream when I was in seminary. That felt like the biggest dream of my life, and I had never been able to decipher it. It was very archetypal. It was very powerful. And leading up to this experience that I recounted, that dream came back, not as a nighttime dream, but its presence came back very strongly to my awareness. And I recognized that it was somehow speaking about power, about our divine power. And in the course of this, a friend of mine just made like an offhanded comment that led me to pull off the bookshelf a book that I, hadn't really looked at closely for a long time. And I open it, and there's this passage about power. It was actually a book about Wicca, as I recall. So that was one synchronicity. And then another friend, I received in the mail this card, also like for a Wiccan holiday, like, sending me this card, like a Christmas card, but it wasn't a Christmas card. And then another one, that this was the one that really blew my mind, was the friend that was especially saying things that were leading me to these sources and resources and helping start to unpack this dream that I'd been carrying for, a decade or more. I pulled out the journal where I had written down that dream from years and years and years ago. And I saw that I had that dream on her birthday. And I didn't even know her at that time in my life. And so the person who was helping reveal the meaning of this dream, I had the dream on her birthday. And so those kinds of things where it's like, no way, we experience these things and it's like, this can't be. And So that gives you a taste of them. There were several, but those are a couple of them.
I love it. I love it. Synchronicities are such a gift. They are, I mean, we either believe we live in a world of lack or a world of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And when we know we live in a world of abundance and we can see the things that are giving us that abundance, it could be money, it could be gifts. Money is only one form of abundance. Synchronicity is another form of abundance. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that we have around us that we can come to see as abundance, and synchronicities is definitely one of them. Before we talk about your books, I'd love to talk about your books and your writing. That journey from moving from the Christian theology into spirituality, and I love what you said about one would think that as a Christian and as a pastor, you were already deep into knowing your true self. What is that difference? What is it that keeps us separate in the Christian, or not even just a Christian, in the religious philosophies? What is it that keeps us separate from our true self? How do those philosophies differ from what spirituality is?
That is
illustrate on that.
Such a great question. Thank you for that, because what I began to see after this experience, the experience revealed to me not only that the separate self is an illusion, but that separateness itself is an illusion. It simply doesn't exist. And I began to then, first of all, I recognized that what I was experiencing, this reality of love, where everything is alive, and it's like the technicolor world and not the black and white world that we tend to inhabit. That reality is what Jesus was talking about when he spoke of the kingdom of God or the realm of God. That's what it is. It's that consciousness. It's that state of consciousness, of oneness, of love, that's what that is. And I began then to recognize how the Christian belief system was actually founded upon the idea of separateness. And I'll say more about what I mean by that. The belief system has looked at Jesus as separate from the rest of humanity and special and set apart. Mm-hmm. So rather than being one of us, he's the one and only Son of God. So he's set apart. So there's already this separateness. He's separated from the rest of humanity in that way. God continues to be a separate, being from us. We continue to be separate from one another and from the earth. And of course, that notion of separateness then began to be sort of expanded into Christian separateness and Christian specialness and Christian supremacy, so that Christianity came to view itself as the only true religion. And so there again, the idea of separateness, being cut off from other traditions, other ways, other paths of knowing. So that's what put me at odds with the religion that I was working within and expected to represent really as a pastor. And it's what eventually took me out of the church. I left the church in 2010 because I couldn't reconcile what I had seen and experienced with what I think of as the architecture of belief of the Christian system. It has its own architecture of belief, and it's fixed, and it wasn't true for me any longer. So eventually I left the church in 2010. But for several years, for 8 years, I tried to hold these worlds together, hoping I could find a way to reconcile them. But in the end, it just seemed like it wasn't really doable.
I really thank you for that, for sharing that, Patricia. I really think those who crafted this philosophies, the religious philosophies, were close to genius, because it is so widespread and so difficult to break. For me as a Christian, what made me leave my Christian faith was realizing that there is a perception of us, on top of everything you've said, which I totally agree with 100%, that we're sinners.
Yes, exactly.
Now, that for me was the nail on the that was the bullet that got me out.
Yep.
Because if I am constantly having to seek forgiveness, there is no way out. I really think it was crafted with such, there's a genius element, because you can never wake up.
Mm.
If you stay in it, there is the way it's been crafted. So you're either in it or you're not. And if you awaken from it, then I think it's almost a miracle to awake and stay away from it. Mm-hmm. It's almost a miracle to do that, because the bond, the conditioning is so strong.
It runs so deep.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because yes, so by putting Jesus on a pedestal and saying he is the one and only Christ, what we're doing is we're projecting our own Christ essence onto a solitary individual. And we are dissuaded from opening up to that in ourselves, because it's being projected onto someone else. And like you're saying, we are unworthy, we are sinners. And it also, in addition to that, casts the divine as a judgmental entity whose judgment and righteousness have to be appeased by a human sacrifice. So all of that is just completely the inverse of love. It's the complete inversion of the reality of love. So I so agree with you that indoctrination goes deeply into ourselves, and the whole belief system, and it really is, an egoic structure. It becomes sanctified. It becomes divinized, because it's God is like this, and judgment is given a sacred purpose, and crucifixion and sacrifice is given a sacred purpose. So all of it is just, it's like the inversion. And that's really what the ego mind does. It inverts reality. Everything that is true becomes turned upside down. And you're right. It is so deeply embedded in us that I call it an undoctrination process. Is very challenging, because it is so deeply embedded in our ways of thinking and perceiving ourselves as well.
I love that. Thank you for that. A lovely discussion. I'd love to know more about your books now. If you tell us, I know that you've written 2 books, and you also write on Substack. So if you could tell us a bit about that, because I'm sure my audience would be really keen to hear.
Sure. Yes. My memoir is called Beyond Jesus, and the title actually was given to me. I was driving to my mother's ash scattering. Actually, it was a year after I'd left the church, and I just got this download, like, how these things come, just this instant knowing that I would write a book called Beyond Jesus that would talk about how ego consciousness had shaped Christian belief. It was just in a flash. I saw it, I felt it, I heard the title, I knew its intention. And the title is all about, moving beyond Jesus. It's like, if Jesus is a doorway, we don't stop at the doorway. He's exemplifying our own true nature. So to go beyond him into like the Christ consciousness that he was embodying and that is within us all. So the book is written as a memoir, but I also think of it as a manifesto that really points to what we truly are and who we truly are. And it traces my journey, my upbringing, what led me to the seminary, some of my other experiences, both in Ecuador and in other places and things, through the awakening process, through the dark night of the soul, the integration, and leaving the church and really seeing how ego consciousness had in fact shaped Christian belief. It seemed like, and it felt like, the best way to share that would be to bring people on my journey so that people could experience that and have those insights as they read the book. So that's my memoir, Beyond Jesus. My other book is I think I have it here. It's a very short little story. It's called No One in I-Land. Actually, the subtitle is A Parable of Awakening. There's a story behind this story, which is I had set out to write a serious book, and the working title was Quantum Christianity, and it was going to look at sort of the overlap between what Jesus was teaching and the findings of quantum physics. And I thought it was going to be really easy to write because I'd given a sermon series by that title, and I had sort of all the topics, So I thought, well, this is going to be a breeze. And when I started to try to write it, it just felt like a total slog. It just felt so laborious, and it was going nowhere. So finally, I just threw my hands up in the air and I said, fine, I'll write whatever comes. And I sat down, and the first line that came was, once upon a no time. And it started to weave this whole tale of how the people once knew themselves as one with the life, and they fell into a sleep and a dream, and they had this dream of being all alone and isolated, and they dreamed of a place called I-Land, where everybody was alone. And so it tells the whole story of the dream, how things unfold, and how then the people begin to awaken again. So it's very playful. It's sort of like a bedtime story for adults. It's very whimsical and fun. It's an easy read. And then, yes, I have a Substack. It's called WeAwakening, and there I have my writings, my blogs, and my WeAwakening podcast as well. And of course, I have my own website, patriciapearce.com.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. I love the way you experienced that synchronicity when you were trying to write your second book. Let me talk about the first. I love the way you also distinguish the Yeshua, Jesus consciousness, from the man, Jesus, because he embodied that consciousness. And I do believe in that Yeshua consciousness. And it is different from the way that Christianity portrays Jesus as a man that had gifts. We all have those gifts. We are our own consciousness. Each of us is a unique part of infinite intelligence, just as he was. And I think he's an example. And I love the way you said, going beyond. Great title. Going beyond that image of the man and into that consciousness, because that is where we would find our true self. I love that. And then the second book, the negative synchronicity, which is because synchronicity can be positive, where things are flowing, and it can be negative, where we are stuck. And it's telling us, try another way. Yes. And we can get used to experiencing both, knowing that the universe is giving us a message, go another way. So that is what happened when you were trying to write the quantum science or quantum Christianity book, and it became a book about awakening. So that's really, a really good inspirational piece there. And I'd love to know a bit more about your WeAwakening podcast. You say, what kind of guests? What's the theme of your podcast?
Well, it really is about the global awakening that we are undergoing right now, and exploring the awakening of consciousness, moving from the dualistic consciousness into unitive consciousness, making this quantum leap, this evolutionary leap of consciousness. And so it explores that, and also looks at some of our current events through that lens, so that we can see what's happening in the world right now as part of that process, and in a sense accelerating that process for us by playing out and exaggerating that egoic story to such an extreme that we can begin to move away from it. So, and I have guests, I have a variety of guests, but people who, are looking at spirituality. I recently interviewed someone who works with dreams, because I think that dreams can be a very helpful guide in our awakening process and our spiritual deepening. And I've interviewed mystics, and I interviewed Lorna Byrne, who's an Irish mystic and has from her childhood been able to see and communicate with angels. So a whole host of people that I speak with.
I love that. I resonate with that. It's all about collective consciousness, an expansion of collective consciousness, and awakening. We all have a light. We all have something that is a way that we want to serve. There is something that we have come that is unique about us. And I think when we have these different guests, like I have on my podcast, it's really about helping others to awaken their own that unique self, that unique gift within us. So I am inspired by that, and I feel resonate with that. That's good. Do you have any final words for those who are on the spiritual awakening journey and who may be going through some dark night of the soul? There are so many. I can't even begin to say how many dark nights of the soul I have had. And it's because life is ups and downs. We will always have contrast. This is the nature of the earth plane, always has contrast. So we never get to a place where everything is so wonderful and hunky-dory. What we are able to do is we're able to hold the light and align to the light quicker and quicker. We're able to feel comfortable and allow the flow, knowing that the river understands us, knowing that we can surrender to the river. We're able to remember that again and again. But there will still be turpits. There will still be, waterfalls we're diving into. So it's always, this is the fun of planet Earth, I think it is. So those who are going through some dark night of the soul, I think, what kinds of tips would you give, or what kind of steps would you give to support the alignment to light? Apart from your books will also do a bit of that, a lot of that actually. And my book, Daily Soul Bytes, will also help to align to light, to love, to unconditional love, which is what consciousness is. Some final word for those who may be going through some kind of dark night.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you said it already, which is the key is to allow, to trust and to know that there is a greater wisdom at play here. And I liken it very much to a process of birth. We have been in this womb for so long that has been gestating us. And we can, we are, Earth is in labor pains right now. The Divine Mother is in labor pains right now, giving birth to us into this higher state of consciousness. And to continue to, as much as possible, and this is obviously a journey and a practice and something that we live into day by day, but to continue to let go of our need to control, to enter into a state of surrender and allowing. Because this is our destiny. As you know, Bola, this is our destiny. And we don't have to create it for ourselves. It's like the caterpillar that undergoes a metamorphosis. It doesn't have to make itself into a butterfly. It hangs itself upside down from a twig, and that is an archetypal pose of surrender. In the tarot, it's the hanged man. It's the hanging upside down, putting the head down. And that's the position of the easiest kind of birth. Not the breech birth where we're resisting the process, but actually surrendering continually in that state, and really being in a place of allowing. And it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come easy because we are so conditioned to try to control, to believe that everything is on us to make happen. We're so conditioned to strive to make things happen and to accomplish things. So this is very counterintuitive. Well, not counterintuitive, but countercultural, certainly. It's very yin. It's very much the feminine principle. Not trying to control, but actually co-creating by allowing ourselves to be birthed and surrendering to the process that is so much bigger than any of us and is completely trustworthy and holds us in love even when we may be terrified. We are never not held in love. That's the basic fundamental understanding. Even if we may not remember it or know it, love never abandons us.
That is so true. Oh, thank you for that reminder. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a delight. Thank you so much, Bola. It's been great.
And I will share all your links with this video on our Spotify and on YouTube. And I really want to ask all our audience to subscribe to the Daily Soul Bytes show on YouTube and on Spotify, and to get the books, Daily Soul Bytes, as well as No One in Ireland and Going Beyond Jesus. Those two books are really powerful. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Daily Soul Bytes show. Bye-bye.